So thank you very much. You had already the introduction, and I also thank everybody in the organization for their support. It has been a beautiful week in Ankara talking about the subjects they're very dear to me, music and musicians and music history. I will talk in English. I'm sure most of you understand what I am saying, but we have translators available. So please ask questions if I am not clear, if I am not clear enough. Please allow me to explain myself clearly if there are problems. And you will find most of the concept on the slides in English, but I will be happy if we can use the help of our translator friend. Our translator friend Gökçe is here, and she already helped us beautifully at Sam's Bistro, so we are counting on her support. The subject we chose with Zuita for this talk is the two careers of two musicians that change the history of jazz, and we can say the history of music of the 20th century. Next year will be the joint anniversary of 100 years from their birth. They were both born in 1926. So I will focus on each of them in parallel, let's speak. The focus, like in this picture, the focus will be first on John Coltrane and then on Davis, and then I'll go back to focusing on the other one. And of course, they have a most important collaboration together for some period in their careers, and I will talk about that as well. Their background, you can see here the two early photos of Miles and John Coltrane. Their social standing and position and background was very different. John Coltrane was coming from a small village. His family was important in the community, but because of moral reasons. Both grandfathers were churchmen, pastors, predicators. So his family had a social role not because of wealth, not because of being rich, but because of the moral stature of these men in the Coltrane's family. At some point, the family lost these characters, these these people, and they had some economical problems, financial problems. So the young John Coltrane had to move first to another small village and finally to Philadelphia, where he started his professional career as a musician. But their beginnings were very different, because Miles came from a wealthy family, and this wealthy family, when he was just 18, was able to send him to New York to study at Juilliard, one of the most prestigious conservatories still today of the United States. In fact, Miles did not go to Juilliard very much. He went around in New York looking for Charlie Parker and looking for the bebop musicians. And he did present himself such in a believable way that at 19, Miles Davis took the place of Dizzy Gillespie in the quintet of Charlie Parker. So he was not yet 20, and he was a member of the most prestigious jazz ensemble of that time, of 45, 46, 47, the Charlie Parker Quintet. Charlie Parker was the prophet of the new music, was the leader of bebop movement. So it was the best trumpet place in a certain way to be. And in 45, he started already to record with Charlie Parker. In his first recording, you can already hear his the color of his trumpet, and the color of his trumpet struck many listeners, and they realized that this trumpeter was going somewhere. He was a singular character. He was an important musician. He did not try to beat Dizzy Gillespie in speed, for example, or in the range that Dizzy Gillespie was covering. He was centering on the sound, on the timbre, of the color of the melody that he could play in the trumpet. So this was 45, and in 10 years, Miles Davis had an amazing career. He played with all the major jazz musicians. He actually established his own project with Gil Evans in 49. He was not yet 20. And he started to play his own conception of music in 49 already. Then this band had some problems, was not commercial enough, so he could not keep it together. He went through a dark period but in that dark period he reconstructed his band, starting with Philly Joe Jones, and created his own first quartet. What was John Coltrane doing during these 10 years? Nobody heard about him. He was playing in second or third rate bands, so to speak, dance band, rhythm and blues bands. He was playing also with important names like Dizzy Gillespie's Big Band, Johnny Hodges, Jimmy Heath, but he was also playing with musicians like Earl Bostic, who was a saxophonist, very popular saxophone player. And Coltrane always mentioned Earl Bostic as a master to him, because Coltrane had this quality of being able to learn what he needed from anybody. Even if this musician was playing a music which was considered very commercial at that time, Coltrane took from him what he needed. He listened to his technique and he reutilized his technique when needed in his more avant-garde music compared to Bostic himself. And strangely enough, they, or maybe it's not, maybe it is a coincidence, maybe it is not, anyway it is meaningful. The first recording with John Coltrane is the same tune, Now's the Time. The tune Miles Davis played with the originator of the tune, Charlie Parker. John Coltrane played with some ex-members of the Navy, where he was stationed. He entered the year before. So they both played Now's the Time as an opening of their career. But anyway, for 10 years, John Coltrane, as the Americans say, he paid his dues. He made experience on the stage, on the bandstand, on the concert, on the dance hall, with accompanying singers, playing all different kind of African American popular music. And this became, of course, in time, very important for his further development. In '54, Coltrane started to play also with Coltrane, but what's happening most important was the year after, in '55. Miles Davis had this dark period, about 5 years, from 49 to 55, to 54, 55. And in '55 he played a set at Newport, at the Newport Jazz Festival. Since at that time he did not have a regular group, the program was a kind of get-together of musicians from different areas. It was not a regular band. Just names that the director of the Jazz Festival in Newport felt they were important enough to be presented on the stage, but they were not the main event. They were, we would say today, a supporting band for the main band. But Miles made a gesture that brought all the focus on him. He played Around Midnight by Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk was at the piano, but Miles played his own version of it. He changed it a little bit, made it slightly simpler for the audience, and had a great success. In the audience that night, as always at Newport, there was a producer, George Avakian, who was working with Columbia, and Miles played on Saturday, and on Tuesday morning, Columbia proposed a contract to him, and Miles Davis signed the contract to Columbia. Up to that point, Miles had recorded only with small labels. For now, today, when we say prestige recording, we say something that we like very much. But Prestige was a fly-by-night small label where only 2 people were working, actually. Signing for Columbia meant going on the top drawer of the popular music of the time. Columbia was the label of Stravinsky, Bernstein, Rosemary Clooney, you name it. Bob Dylan, Bruno Walter, all of these people were recording for Columbia in all different kinds of music. So it was a major step for him. But the problem with Miles was that he had still a contract with Prestige. And the contract said Miles Davis has to give to Prestige 5 more albums. So they had a problem. So he could not go to Columbia immediately. He had to give to Prestige the albums to fulfill his contract obligation. So they thought a mechanism which was unprecedented. Miles would start recording for Columbia. In the meantime, Prestige could publish all the album that Coltrane was giving them. So in a way, Prestige was using Columbia as a promotional tool, because the publicity, the force of on the market of Columbia was many times the force of Prestige. So Coltrane brought his band in the studio 2 days, and he recorded basically 5 records in 2 days. And those records are very lively, because as the band is together, they play like a jazz club set, the atmosphere of a jazz club. And the recordings are very much prized by everybody. And those recordings were the recordings where Coltrane made his mark for the first time. Coltrane was in the band. Miles already had made his mark, because he already played with the tuba band, with Charlie Parker, etc. But the first exposure of Coltrane to the great public, to the great audience, was with these records, with Miles and Coltrane together in the first Miles Davis quintet, the first great. He dedicated, let's listen to some short example. Miles giving him exposure. Train's Blues, written by John Coltrane for the band. You can hear already the difference in characters. Miles is a master of the emptiness and the fullness, the dark and then the white. And Coltrane is straining at the chords. So Coltrane is already bordering dissonance and starting to use his flurry of notes. The sequences of very fast notes that then will become called as sheet of sounds. And also you see the graphic presentation is very random. There is pictures, there is graphic arts, no one knows why the trees in the first quintet record, everywhere with the trees, but there is no reason for the trees. There are no trees mentioned even in the titles of the pieces. And then there is a picture, then there is another picture, then there is a beautiful graphic graphic, and then the totally different style graphic. So this has nothing to do with a coordinated presentation of the artist. Maybe Prestige did not even want to give the idea that it was a single production. They wanted the albums to mix with those of the Columbia records, because that way they will be promoted together with the Columbia records. But the Columbia started with a totally different image, the image of the thinking trumpeter. He's not heroic, he's not playing, he's not on top of his game. He's listening what is happening with the band. It is in the dark, there is not too much light. And the record is called Round About Midnight, because it makes reference to the performance at the Newport Jazz Festival. This is not a live performance, but a studio rendition with Coltrane, Garland, Paul Chambers, and Philly Joe Jones. The atmosphere is totally different. The first one is very relaxed, the nightclub atmosphere, the dialogue between the musicians. This one is very deliberate, very, we can almost hear the thinking about. There is a concept to the way they play, an impression that they want to give. We're talking about 1955, 56. So what we must think about is that at that point, the jazz market was dominated by the cool jazz coming from California. So they had to find a way which was sounding modern enough to compete with Jerry Mulligan, Chet Baker, Stan Getz, etc. And at the same time, they should, this is my telephone, which I will not answer to. And they had to find a way to play with that sounded modern enough, cool enough to compete with those musicians, but at the same time in a different way. So in this music you can hear more drama. There is a lot of more tension compared to the joyous style of Jerry Mulligan and Chet Baker together. And talking about covers, the Columbia totally missed the second chance. For the second chance, they called Gil Evans. So this is the first collaboration between Gil Evans and Miles on Columbia. But they put a white label, or a white lady, a white girl, a white model. This is not even an original photo. This is a stock they bought from some photographer. Because there is, of course, a wordplay. Miles ahead can be Miles is ahead, or the miles are the miles, the sea miles. So you are there is a boat race and somebody is miles ahead. But the image got Miles very angry. He telephoned to Columbia, got very angry, used very bad words with the chiefs of the Columbia. And from that moment on, he began to ask for control of his image on the cover themselves. And he was the first musician to do so. Usually, Thelonious Monk or Coleman Hawkins or Charlie Parker, they would see the record only when it was out. They were not consulted about the cover. They were not giving the chance of expressing a message with the cover of the record. But Miles was the first one, so they prepared the second cover immediately, which was hastily prepared and not very brilliantly in graphic. And from then on, all the covers of Miles were published only with his approbation and many times with his suggestion of what he wanted on the cover. He didn't want a white girl, for sure. In '59, Miles Davis and John Coltrane made together the record that announced the '60s, Kind of Blue, and Kind of Blue was the record that everybody was listening to in the '60s. Not only the jazz musician, but also the classical listeners, the rock and roll player. You read the interviews with all the musicians, and all were listening and talking about Kind of Blue. Root Records, an epochal record, because from Kind of Blue, you can see the evolution of jazz in the following decade. Everything that happens in the '60s started inside Kind of Blue. Cannonball Adderley started soul jazz, and he was part of this band. John Coltrane started free jazz, or accompanied the development of free jazz in '61 with Coltrane and Village Vanguard. Bill Evans, who was the other piano player together with Wynton Kelly, with his trio started a new way of playing as a piano trio in jazz. And the rhythm sections of Miles, the two rhythm sections, the classical quintet for Prestige and the quintet for Columbia, became the rhythm section. If someone was playing with a Miles Davis rhythm section, there was not even, you did not to write the names. You said, meets the rhythm section, everybody knows who are we talking about. It's an all-American rhythm section, as they used to say. 2 weeks after recording this masterpiece, Miles was standing in front of a nightclub, talking with a white girl. A drunk policeman approached him, asking what he was doing. He said, I'm working here. This is the nightclub. You see, there is my name on the marquee because I'm playing here. And the policeman said that he attacked me. And he immediately hit him on his head with his baton. So Miles was, his beautiful shirt and dress was all bloody. And he went to the hospital with the policeman and with his lawyer. This is Lovett, who was his agent and lawyer, and Miles Davis liked him very much because he was also very stylish in dressing. And he sued the city, of course. He got several $100,000 in damages for this attack. But this is the man that produced Kind of Blue. 2 weeks after producing Kind of Blue, he was standing on a street in New York. And you might think that he would be some kind of celebrity. No, it was just a black person on the street. And the policeman was irritated because he was talking with a white girl, probably, better looking than his own white girl. And so this gives you a perception of something that Miles never abandoned, the perception of segregation. Miles, one of the reasons of the depression that Miles Davis went in between 49 and 55 was that he came back from Paris. And in Paris, he was there for a jazz festival, he experienced a social life that he could not dream of in the United States. Everybody wanted to be with him. Movie stars, not only jazz musicians or jazz listeners. Movie stars, classical composers, writers, philosophers, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, you name it. He was a big star, but not a star, a pop star. He was an intellectual star. So, of course, in Europe there was racism at that time, even now there is, it may be even worse. But toward the African-American musician, the jazz musician especially, enjoy the social status that they never had in their own country. That's why so many of them moved there to Paris, starting with the 20s, Ada Smith, and then Josephine Baker from the Cotton Club, and then Don Byas, Kenny Clarke, or many other companions of Miles. So Miles was fighting with that, and when you hear him making, declaration that might sound harsh or, difficult, he was described as difficult to deal with, but he had his own reasons to be difficult to deal with, because he was dealt with in a very bad way. But he managed to put his several girlfriends and wives on the cover of the records, finally. And they were not very happy marriages all the time. This is the last record that Miles and Coltrane did together. He was just a guest. The quintet was already with a different saxophone player, Hank Mobley, but John Coltrane guested in two pieces. One is the title piece, Someday My Prince Will Come, that we had yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And the other one is called Tio. Tio is a Latin-tinged piece. Tio, who is Tio? Tio is Tio Macero. Tio Macero is a very important character. Many times also the jazz lovers don't realize about these figures that stay in the background of the records. But Tio Macero at some point became the co-author, the co-leader of Miles' records. Some very important records. He was not just the producer, he was the co-editor, he was the co-director of the record. Tio Macero was a saxophone player, composer. He studied contemporary composition, he studied record production. He was hired by Columbia. He hired for Columbia Mingus, his Mingus Minga Mingum album is because of Tio Macero. He hired for Columbia Thelonious Monk, and he was called to work with Miles Davis. And he worked with Miles Davis until the 70s, and also in bits and pieces also later on. In some of the recordings of Miles, as I was saying, he applied very advanced technique. When Miles started to record it with 8 tracks recordings, it was Tio Macero that knew how to handle those and transform those 8 tracks recordings into tool for creativity. He was one of the composers of the records, we can say. At the same time, of course, Coltrane released A Love Supreme, recorded in 64 but published in 65. And A Love Supreme is an evolution of Kind of Blue in a sense, because even more than Kind of Blue, A Love Supreme is a concept album. When they started to do records, LP records, they were just collection of songs. 12 songs, 10 songs, whatever. Whatever was successful, they would put on the record. Only slowly the industry realized that that record allowed unique, homogeneous idea, homogeneous project. You could do a record with only one theme. And of course, for example, Frank Sinatra was very important in that. His Capitol records, Come Dance With Me or Only the Lonely Knows, are in a way concept record. But A Love Supreme is a suite. It's like he was published a symphony or a sonata. 4 movements around the same theme, based on the same idea, on the same concept. And it was very important because the following concept album, or the proper, in a certain sense, concept album like Sgt. Pepper's or Pet Sounds, are obviously inspired, and their composers, Lennon, McCartney, Wilson, Brian Wilson, all acknowledge the influence of A Love Supreme on their work. Miles had a huge problem. He did not have a Coltrane in the band anymore. Coltrane was very different for him, but it was such a strong personality, such a strong force, that Coltrane took several years before reorganizing from 61 to 65 again. Almost every decade in Miles' career follows the same pattern or a similar pattern. His new quintet was created with the collaboration of the very young drummer Tony Williams, and then a final and not most important, but the final piece of the puzzle was Wayne Shorter as a musical leader. Miles Davis himself was never a composer in the strict sense of the word, but he was composing like Ellington with the people he called in the band. He was creating an environment, creating a situation where the musicians would give the best of themselves. So this was the case of that band. That band that at some point even grew beyond Miles. At some point they started to play in this live recording, Cooking at the Plug and Nickel. They started to play against Miles. They started to play with, they arranged, the young guys in the band got an agreement without Miles knowing, and said we will start to play end-time music. We will play in a totally different way. And they call it rhythm, no changes. Somehow Miles and Coltrane were still following the idea of changes, of harmonic development, but they were following only the idea of rhythm, of swing, of groove. And on that groove you could put almost anything. So in a way, you know, Miles said was always very argumentative. He was always doing arguments with fellow musicians. But in a way, he incorporated bebop and cool in his music of the 60s, and then also free jazz after 61, because this proceeding of the late recording of Miles Davis Quintet, especially this recording at the Plug and Nickel, that Columbia was so worried about it. And the first record, that they published only one record, then a double record. They only after 20 years they published the full box of the full week of recording of that jazz club in Chicago. These are also the years of the end of the career of John Coltrane. John Coltrane died in '67. And he recorded a lot in those years. He recorded a lot live in studio, in his own studio, in his house. And these recordings are the most difficult to, you know, the last 3 years of Coltrane, when McCoy Tyner left the group and Alice Coltrane entered the group, Alice MacLeod Coltrane entered the group, are the years that still musicologists have difficulties with, because he went into a phase where even time was in discussion, even rhythm. He was going for the sound of the saxophone, or the truth in the vibration of the sound. And these records are very, very, you know, for me are very important, but I understand it is obviously, they are obviously very difficult to analyze in terms of classical musicology, of classical music. This is one example of that time. So this was the time after the death of John Coltrane. Miles had another turn. Steve Lace said that for many years the world of jazz was waiting for the new record of Miles Davis to know what they would be playing next, because he was inserting so many ideas. And maybe one of the most popular and most relevant albums of that time is In a Silent Way, because this is the first time that Miles goes fully electric, and the production of the album is totally in the hands of Miles and Tio Macero, editing the tapes. In the album there are only 40 minutes of music, but actually there are only 33 minutes of recording, because 7 minutes are repeated, are looped, So Miles and Theo Masero were using the idea of sampling and looping their own music, which of course became popular with hip hop, sampling, and etc., in the 80s, 90s, and so forth. And in a silent way is two pieces, one for each side of the album. So it's a totally uncommercial concept. There are some critics that, those people that don't like electric instruments in jazz, said Miles went commercial. Miles were totally anti-commercial because you can't get commercial with 20 minutes of music. You need 3 minutes of music, 4 minutes to go on the radio. Miles wanted maybe to be commercial, but he never managed to do it. He never managed to do the Watermelon Man or the Birdland, 4 minutes that goes on all radios. Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul did. His collaborators did. The tragic, I would not say tragic, but interesting phase of this career of Miles is that all his alumni, all the people that learned from him, were making much more money than himself, because the big commercial success was Weather Report, Herbie Hancock had Hunters, John McLaughlin, and all the other electric orchestra. All the people that played in the Miles band came from the Miles University, so to speak. And his band of that time, the live band, is called the Lost Quintet. The Lost Quintet with Dave Holland on bass, because they never recorded in studio. But fortunately, there is a lot of radio recording, live recordings, that was published even by Columbia. Columbia published this beautiful series of albums called the Bootleg series. Bootleg is a non-authorized recordings. These are not really bootlegs because they were authorized live recording. But anyway, Columbia used this logo to create a 6-volume series where you can hear live the recording by Miles from the 1960, I think, to almost the end of his career. So there is this phase is so interesting for jazz historian that there is a book dedicated only to this specific quintet, which is the Lost Quintet, because there are no studio recordings. And talking of covers, obviously Miles took care of the covers and invited this artist Matt Clarvine. Matt Clarvine was a very interesting character, a Jewish man who took a Muslim name in order to symbolize peace in the world. And he saw his painting and his work. He was also decorating, let's say, places where people could go to meditate, but they were not churches of any religion, just meditation, concentration places. And this, he had, represent two different worlds, Africa and the white world, the devil and the angel. It's always him. Miles Davis live, Selim Sivad evil on the cover. And of course you would recognize some Kufic characters that you can see on the mosque in Mardin or while visiting Eastern Turkey, which Clarvine put that there, of course. Imitation character, of course. It's only the geometry. So this was another phase that ended in '75 for Miles. Miles made 2 records called Agartha and Pangaea, live in Japan. Each one is 1-hour concert. And at that point, he retired from music again. He retired from music because he felt that his lesson was becoming commercial. Fusion music was becoming commercial. And his music never was. He was very experimental, always very experimental. So I will play to you a track that if I did not announce it as a Miles Davis or even jazz, maybe you would not think about it. It's like a kaleidoscope. You keep looking at it and you're always changing shape. Whenever you try to fix on something, you lose it immediately. And it gives you almost the vertigo feeling. His final comeback was in '85. He tried to do a project with Jimi Hendrix. Of course, Jimi Hendrix, blues guitar player, but one of the major composers and improvisers of African American music beyond borders. He made a polemic, argumentative record for Columbia called "You Are Under Arrest." And then he went to Warner Brothers for Tutu. Tutu, this is the cover of Tutu was, I tell you, to the younger youngest between you. Tutu was an Archbishop of South Africa and one of the most important figures of the fight against segregation of South Africa. And he dedicated to him his one of the most beautiful themes of his career. He ever did. He played some kind of funk jazz or soul jazz inspired to soul music. He was something more like to a soul singer than to a rock and roll player. And he was always experimental. That rhythm mix shows that he was never a commercial reason that brought him to use electronic instrument and change his way of music. But he changes his way always up to a certain point, because you can always hear Miles. You can hear Miles in 45, and you hear Miles 50 years, not 50, 45 years later. His voice is instantly recognizable, and his spirit is the same. What is changed is around. The society is changed. The instrument is changed. The popular music is changed. And he's reflecting these changes. But he's not changing the nature of this music. The nature of the music is always, of course, tense, dark at times, often a sort of protest music, never completely joyous, but he is always expressing the feelings that are very similar to the beginning of his career. So can we, since I'm a teacher in conservatories, in jazz school, etc., I always give some ideas to reading after doing my speeches. Can we follow Miles and Coltrane through the literature in a parallel way? Actually, we can. It is quite interesting to check this. There are two major biographies that I recommend of these two musicians. One is So What by John Swett, the great scholar and musicologist. And the other one is John Coltrane by Louis Porter. Louis Porter is the person that actually identified the reading in Allah Supreme, in the fact that in Allah Supreme, Coltrane is reading his own poem through the saxophone. So these are the basic biography, the best biography, in my opinion, of these two musicians. Then there is another important couple of books, which is the interview collection. Both musicians have the interviews collected, and even the format, interestingly enough, of the two books is quite similar. They had the same idea, the same wording and the same idea of a painting. So these are the musicians talking about them, about the music. Coltrane talked very little, so everything Coltrane said is in this book. Miles, with a long career, talked a lot, so not everything is there, but the most important interviews are. And then there are the books about the records. There is a book about Kind of Blue, and there is a book about Allah Supreme. Books that examine the production and the fortune of these records. And then, of course, interesting enough, there is the Beyond books. Both musicians have a Beyond book. Beyond is beyond acoustic in this case. Miles is still alive, but he's exploring a different area of music in the late 60s until 1991, basically. And Beyond Allah Supreme is a very interesting book of the new jazz studies, examining the legacy of Allah Supreme. It is not about the music of Coltrane himself, because Coltrane was died in 67, but he contextualized Coltrane in contemporary African-American expression. And both musicians have a reference. There is a John Coltrane reference. We have to confess, we all jazz lovers have to confess, we are a little bit obsessive in our love. So this is a kind of a huge volume collecting every single item of information that we have about John Coltrane. all the clubs where he played, all the recordings, all the interview, all the dates of the record, all the takes, all the musicians, everything. The John Coltrane reference is the second edition. It was compiled by this expert. Chris DeVito is the collector of the interviews book, and Louis Porter is the author of the biography. So those are two major experts. And the reference about Davis is published by the same publisher, the Routledge, but it is not, there is a content, but this content is only the index of publication. These publications are described, though. So there is 2 lines that say what is in the publication itself. So it is actually readable. It's not just the index. You can have a feeling of what is in the book. Since we are in Turkey, I will tell that one of the phrases is very funny. Includes text in French, Spanish, Italian, most European languages. I even found one in Turkish, says the review of the book on the reference magazine, which is a magazine for librarians. In fact, there is not one. There are 4 texts in Turkish in the book. 2 are translations of book about Miles Davis, and 2 are articles about Miles himself. So this is the end of my presentation. That doesn't mean that we have to finish our conversation. If you are interested in receiving the PDF of these slides, I will be happy to send them to you. Just drop me a message at my email address. I forgot the but but you know that there is there.
I'm so sorry.
So you can send me an email. Now, I know this is a very awkward, embarrassing moment every time, but if someone has something to ask, they can even ask, first of all, is there something that I was not clear of? Do you have some clarification to ask about things that I said maybe too quickly and you couldn't follow me enough? Or if you want to ask some question of other types, you can. You can ask in Turkish if I don't understand. Gökçe here will be most happy to translate. So please, don't be shy. We have some time. Yeah, piano player at the end.
I want to know about how the second quintet.
Come closer because I will hear you better. You are in the stairwell.
I want to know about how the second quintet meet and how Miles found amazing musicians that young ages on them.
Absolutely, very young. Tony Williams was 17.
Yeah, Herbie Hancock.
Herbie Hancock was slightly older. But this is something that Miles did every time. Because now we are considering Coltrane as a mature musician or Philly Joe Jones as a mature musician. But they were very young when they entered Coltrane's band. And even afterwards, he involved with Michael Henderson, the electric bass player from Aretha Franklin's band in Live Evil, and of course Marcus Miller in the final production, the record as a bass player, bass clarinet player, and editor. So he did this all the time. He started with Hancock. That Hancock, before entering that band, was already band leader. He already had recorded for Blue Note. So Miles had a wide and very healthy listening habit. He was listening to everyone. He was always, sorry?
Herbie Hancock have which recording before Miles?
The recording with...
Huh?
Presenting Herbie Hancock. The first time, I guess the Herbie Hancock's first time,
The
which Dexter Gordon plays there also. So
Blue Note albums
Okay.
by Herbie Hancock and with Herbie Hancock. But sometimes it's not his album, but he's playing with Dexter Gordon and Freddie Hubbard and other musicians. So he had a wide listening habit. For example, when Ornette came to New York with the free jazz band, with Don Cherry, Blackwell, etc., he was playing the 5-spot, I think, and Miles came there, and he went to the bar. He was with his back at the band. He was just talking with the bartender very, very intensely and drinking beer. But of course, there were many places to drink beer in New York at that time. He went there because he wanted to listen to Ornette Coleman. And in fact, whatever Ornette Coleman did, he later took and incorporated in his second quintet. So the beginning was Herbie Hancock, and then Herbie Hancock recommended Tony Williams. Tony Williams was really a discovery because he hadn't played with anybody or very little at that point. But he was already known in the ambient, in the scene, because he studied with important drummers of Boston, because he's from Boston, used to be, he was born in and grew up in Boston. So he always did the same thing. When he created the first quintet, he started with, he always started creating one line or one axe, and then the group is rotating on that axe. And the axe of this first quintet was Philly Joe Jones. They started to play together, and they found the other musicians together. For the second quintet was Herbie Hancock, and Herbie Hancock recommended the other musicians. So that's why he operated. But he was always, very excited about new music. Even Kind of Blue. Kind of Blue was created because he heard something that you might not connect to Kind of Blue. He had an African ballet, the Guinea National Ballet Company. So he had an African orchestra in New York, and that was the starting point, the seed for Kind of Blue, which you might not hear as especially connected to African traditional music in itself. But he had this attitude, listening classical music, listening. He was always listening Tosca by Puccini, the piece I played when I spoke about Italian opera and jazz, the last piece by Gianluigi Trovesi. And on the other hand, he was also requested by another person who had very big ears, which was Duke Ellington. When Duke Ellington heard that Miles was out of Charlie Parker's quintet, Duke Ellington sent for Miles. He let Miles know, these musicians have their diplomacy to work with. He let Miles know that he was wanted by Duke. And he sent word back, he was not interested. He was working with Gil Evans. Can you think a musician that are 20 years old is invited to play with Duke Ellington? He say, no, thank you, because I have my own project? Miles did, and created the tuba band, the Birth of the Cool sessions with Gil Evans. So he was himself experiencing being a very young musician and courageous independent musician. He was looking for musicians who had the same attitude. So he was looking at Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Tony Williams, what those were. And of course, the final was Wayne Shorter. But Wayne Shorter was already an important musical director because he was the saxophone player and main composer for Art Blakey's Jazz Messenger. So he invited him knowing that he could be the musical leader of the band in a way. And that was the last piece of the puzzle that he put together. So mainly listening and very carefully to new musicians. That's how he was operated. New musician and unknown music to him. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it is enough or maybe many more details you will find in the books, but this is what I remember, the main points I remember about the subject. Somebody else? Very nice. Please.
When we talk about second grade quintet, before that, I want to ask about the Kind of Blue. I have huge confusion about who wrote actually all the songs. Miles.
This is this is a complicated subject because you are applying the idea that there is a composer sitting, in his house at the piano and notating and playing something and notating. This was not what was happening. These people were playing together all the time. If someone had a big idea, a nice melody, he would play it in a solo and somebody else would pick it up as a composition. So it was a continuous improvising and composing, writing and playing. There was no clear distinction. So at some point they say Miles copied this or copied that. Maybe he was not very careful about this. Maybe he even played some of those ideas together with them. This is also how Duke Ellington operated. Duke Ellington's pieces many times changed according to the ideas of the soloist. So if One Tis All of Rex Stewart or Johnny Hodges was having a particularly good idea, Duke Ellington would pick up on that idea and incorporate it into the score, into the composition itself, in his own band. In this case, they were playing together all the time. For example, we were talking before about composers and you know, this type of problem. If you listen to the arrangement by Mary Lou Williams, very important composer, you know, the place of the women in jazz is not enough clear, not enough on the spotlight in the jazz history, but Mary Lou Williams was one of the inspirators of bebop. In one of her arrangement of Let It Be Good, you can hear Hackensack by Thelonious Monk. Did Thelonious Monk steal it? Probably not. Probably they played together, and the same idea circulated between Mary Lou Williams, Thelonious Monk, and other piano player of the time. So, of course, when you put a name, because you have to put a name when you copyright a piece, you have to put a name. It's difficult to describe. But you know, it is not really the main problem. The main problem for me is that the copyright system does not include improvisation. You know, Lee Konitz played all the things you are every evening during his career for decades. He was playing a different piece every evening. But the copyrights were always given to the composer of the piece, because there was no way to recognize his creative contribution as an improviser. So we are really trying to put a complex process of creation into the straitjacket of the composer-performer system, which has been historically became the dominant system in European music, but which was not before, which was not everywhere. Recently, I received a copy of a program, of the concert program of Mozart. Mozart played the concert in Mantua for the Academy of Mantua in 1770. And if you look at the program, there is no composer. It's only improvisations. The young prodigy will improvise on a theme taken from the audience. There is not a single name of a composer in the concert program. It's all about him, and also the themes that he would use are anonymous. So we are a little bit, you know, fossilized, very strict in our idea of composition, improvisation, writing, performing. These separate categories are not representing well. So that's what happened. Of course, if you put your name and then a piece becomes very successful, people will tell you, should I put my name too there? And maybe they were right up to a certain point. But the system is not representing how it goes. What was it? Donna Lee also is one of those pieces that somebody recorded and somebody else thought he was the author. But many of those were circulating riffs sometimes that were then put on arrangement. So it is a kind of course, all of us, we have selective memory. If you think about what happened, our places becomes bigger and bigger with the coming of the year. So maybe some people is actually convinced that they composed something, maybe they only had the idea of a small piece of it. And then Miles was the director of everything. Miles had the idea of putting these people together. Without putting these people together and bringing these people in the Columbia studio, that composition would have been dead, most probably, if it was by somebody else. Johnny Hodges was a fantastic saxophone player in the orchestra of Duke Ellington. He was sick and tired of Duke Ellington, and he created his own orchestra. And his own orchestra sounded like a bad copy of Duke Ellington's orchestra. So he went back to Duke Ellington. There was no other way. Now, there was no other surviving frame for him. But Duke Ellington was the director, was the mastermind of that. So if you look at that, you understand that even, you know, giving a specific melody of part of the melody is quite a small part of the great picture of this type of music, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Please. Please.
You see that the composer is not the main thing, that the director is the main object that directs
It-
says
the idea of the composer is attached to European classical music or the commercial song. A jazz piece is made anyway. So, for example, Jimmy Cobb, the drummer of Kind of Blue, never gets any composition credits, of course. But who can forget his symbol in Kind of Blue? But no one wrote this. He just did it. How can you consider this in this copyright compositional system? You should have a kind of multiple layer of composition itself or recognition.
You have to know. You have to know you have to know the classical music, like
Yes.
classical. You have to know
Y-
all
it-
those.
yes, in my opinion, it's like that.
Thank you very much.
Please.
I have one more question about second
Okay,
grade.
let's see.
Second question also.
Yeah. You said that the rhythm section on second grade quintet created the unique sound of it, right?
Well,
Without Miles' knowledge.
no, that started after a certain point. That was the plugged nickel.
Hmm.
First of all, Miles called all these boys because he wanted to be surprised. He did not want musicians of his own age.
Mhm.
He wanted something new. So that's what he wanted for them, to do something that I'm not able to do. And at some point they almost, let's say, organized a kind of revolt inside the band. And they started all playing at the same time at the plug and needle with this technique of rhythm, no changes. And then Miles, they say, Miles came back after the first set in the dressing room and they say, would you like to explain me what is going on in this band? Using different terms, of course. So that was them, like, seizing the power. But Miles, that's what he wanted in a way.
So it was a start, but it was like one concert only. This thing.
No, it was a process.
Process.
For me, it was a process, and the process culminated in the plug and nickel.
Plug and
The
nickel.
plug and nickel live recordings are the most, are the explosion of that band.
Which
You mean
year
the live
that
evil
you-
times? You
Sorry?
mean the live evil times?
I don't understand. Sorry?
No, no. Is he talking about the live evil times?
No, no.
Okay.
Live, the second quintet, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter,
Oh, okay.
Donny Williams.
Gotcha.
This is live at the Plug and Nickel in Chicago.
Oh,
It is a
gotcha.
box. At the end, Columbia released all the complete recording for a week. The total week of recordings. First they started with only one LP, then a double LP,
Mhm.
then a second double, and then finally they released all of it. But they were scared because the music was so different.
Yep.
Even if they played even So What. They play even some pieces, composed pieces, but they are totally changed. They are totally revolutionized by the band itself.
Mm. What do you mean by saying that no chords?
I mean, no chords, no changes. They try to play all together, rhythmically, but without respecting the changes of the piece.
Okay. So there is only one chord, or
The chord comes from the improvisation. The chord from, Ornette Coleman was working in the same way.
Mhm.
What was that Ornette Coleman called harmolodics? Harmolodics is all the instrument that can play notes, double bass, trumpet, saxophone, play their own melodies. These three melodies, they are three notes together. This is a chord. But these melodies go independently. They are improvised. So there are chords, but these chords are not predetermined.
Okay, thanks.
So this is the idea. This was a very old idea. Huh? If you listen to the recording of the 20s, when they do the stop time accompanying, this is what they do actually in New Orleans, in Jelly Roll Morton bands. They play stop time, meaning that all the bands play one note at the same time, but they can decide which note they want to play. Of course, it is left to the taste of the musician to make this work. It's a demand of the musician. They are outside of the frame. They don't have the safety net of the changes. So it's very risky. Sometimes it doesn't work. But when it works, it is a magic moment because those minds are thinking in the same way without communicating verbally. So that's what the effect that they wanted to reach. But of course, the audience was kind of amazed.
Yes, thanks for
Pleasure.
your words.
Some more? Please.
I'm not going to ask about music. First of all, thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you very
And
much.
I'm someone that don't know about, like, I've listened to them, but haven't read about them. So sorry about my question.
Please.
It comes from an ignorant place. And we have seen Miles Davis, how he has been not arrested, but assaulted by the police.
Yes.
So I was wondering, and he's a black man in,
Yes.
in a tumultuous time in U.S. where still there's rights that they have to acquire and, you know.
Absolutely.
So I was wondering how his race affected his music and what's the connection there, and also we've seen how he was angry at the cover of his,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yes, that's what I wondered. And
Well, you know, there is this character in the history of jazz called Pannonica de Königswarter. Pannonica de Königswarter was a Rothschild by family. She was very rich, and she fell in love with jazz. So she left her family, basically. His husband was ambassador of France in Mexico, and she stayed in New York and became the patroness of the musicians. Was bringing Thelonious Monk up and down Manhattan with the Bentley because she was very rich. And she has this book, 3 Questions to the Jazz Musicians. So she asks the same 3 questions, the same question, in fact. What are your 3 wishes? You have 3 wishes to make real. Which wishes they are? And Coltrane says, I want pace of earth. The others say, I want to be rich. Someone says, I want the best school for my family. Those things. First album of Miles, I want to be white.
Ah,
So he resented that very much. He resented that in social life. He resented that in musical production. He was always, he was not political very much. He was not openly political, but he was always very well aware of the discrimination. Even if he was rich, his father was rich. He was rich. He could, you know, buy cars, flats, and whatever. Still, he was felt the discrimination, and that's why he felt so badly coming back from Europe. At some point, this concentration on funk and soul music maybe came also out of the difficulties of working across the race line. But for us, you know, it's very easy to forget. For us, it's very easy to forget. You know, for me, black and white is the same. It's not the same. It's not historically the same, especially in the United States and also in Europe. So there is a lot of different discrimination. And for Miles, it was always a case of reconnecting with his black audience. And this is also the problem he felt with jazz, because jazz became something quite intellectual, also because of him, because his record were very intellectual. So he wanted to change that. He wanted to go back on the corner. There is one record by Miles called On the Corner, with the young people staying and, you know, they groove and they listen to music. He wanted to be there. He dedicated the record to a very famous black pugilist, how do you call it, boxer, Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson won a match with a white boxer. It was a very big thing because you can see, can you think about the feeling of a black man in the United States seeing a stage with a black man hitting a white man and then sending him to the carpet? It's a major satisfaction. So he was a big hero for African America. So despite his social position being so high, he always resented the discrimination. And so this last record, these more funk records, soul records, was he was trying to reconnect with that audience. And he was, of course, his character was, he was not easy to deal with. Many other people like, Herbie Hancock, or other musicians that played with him were, they were more flexible in their characters. They could deal and wheel a little bit more with the industry. Miles never did, and that's why finally he never became a pop artist or popular artist. Even in the 70s, if you wanted to fill a stadium, you would invite the Weather Report or Mahavishnu Orchestra or the other headhunters. So not his band, and he was the originator of that style. So always his race and the position of his race always impacted on him and on his music. And every time he could be provocative. He would buy a Lamborghini or Ferrari and go around as a black man, go around Manhattan, driving this car. That was a kind of provocation to the white power structure. He liked the cars as well, of course, but it was also a kind of cultural provocation at the same time. And you see them also in the covers that he used for his records.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Excellent conversation. Something more? Oh, we have ended our time, I think, huh? We're almost 2 hours.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, really. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for listening. See you next time. Görüşmek üzere.